Masechet Baba Batra, Daf, Kof Mem Gimel. Yesterday we saw a case where someone tells his wife, any future children that we have, I'm going to give them all the property. And then the older sibling comes and says, hey dad, what about me? And he says, okay, you'll get an extra portion like them. So in this case, does the that older sibling actually get anything or not? So that was a machloket. And one opinion, the one that we ended with, said no. Why? Because it's not in the power of the father to give an extra portion to the unborn children because they're not born, and you can't give them anything before they're born. They will inherit like normal the children do and get an equal part with any of the other sons that are there, but they're not going to get an extra portion. So, therefore, when the father tells a young adult child who comes and says, "What about me?" and he says, "Okay, you get a portion like them," it doesn't work because he's only comparing that older kid to unborn ones that don't get anything. And so we compared it to a case of someone says, "Kene kahamor." Someone goes to his friend and says, "I want you to acquire this item like a donkey would." He doesn't acquire it because a donkey cannot acquire anything. So if you compare a person's acquisition to a donkey's acquisition, then he doesn't get anything. And now we're going to go into that case itself. Di'itmar, kene kachamor lo kana. So we learned that if someone says, acquire this like a donkey would, he doesn't get anything. But here's a more complicated case that has a three-way machloket. At vachamor. Rav Nachman amar kana mechsa. Rav Hamnuna amar lo amar kelum. Rav Sheshat amar kana hakol. If someone says, I want you to acquire this and a donkey also. You and a donkey shall both acquire this thing. So then how do we parse that out? Rav Nachman says, half. The person gets half, the donkey gets nothing, because the donkey can't acquire anything. But what he meant by that is, you get half, the donkey gets half. The half of the statement that he said about the donkey is meaningless, so the donkey won't get anything. But the half that he said about you, yeah, you get it. But Rav Hamnuna says that he said nothing because he said a statement that half of it is nonsense. Therefore, we throw out the entire thing. Since a donkey cannot acquire anything, therefore, when he puts you together with the donkey, then the person will not get anything either. And Rav Sheshat says that the person gets everything. Since he says $100, you and the donkey get $100. Since the donkey can't get anything because it can't acquire anything, therefore the person gets all 100. So we have extreme positions and the middle opinion of Rav Nachman. Amar Rav Sheshat, mina amina lah. So Rav Sheshat says, I'm going to prove my opinion that the person gets everything. We can ignore the donkey part of it. And since he says you get some of it and the donkey gets nothing, that means the person gets all of it. What's my proof? Tanya Rabbi Yosef Omer, en lecha amar bakishut ela penimi shebo. Leficha kishu torem mosif al achison shebo vetorem. There's a braita that Rabbi Yosef says there is nothing bitter in the cucumber except its inner part. In other words, you have a cucumber, the outside is generally going to be edible, but the inside of it often is bitter, not very edible. And therefore, if someone is taking terumah, let's say he has 50 cucumbers and he wants to take terumah, he's going to take 2%, so he's going to take one cucumber. If he separates one cucumber and says this is terumah, then he should actually add a little bit more because you're not supposed to separate as terumah something that's not edible. And so therefore he should take one cucumber plus half of another one. That way he'll be separating 2% for terumah of all material that is edible. That is the braita. Now Rav Sheshat says, Amai at v'chamorhu. Now how come this takes effect at all? Right? In other words, why does it even work? After all, this is similar to the case of at v'chamor. Just like in the case of at v'chamor, he's saying $100 is going to go to you and the donkey. So here also, and it can go to you, but it can't go to the donkey. Here also, he's saying that this cucumber is going to be terumah, but only the outside of the cucumber is properly allowed to be terumah, and the inside is not properly allowed to be terumah. So you might say, if you agreed with Rav Hamnuna, that since part part of the cucumber cannot be teruma, then none of it. But that's not the halacha here, nor do we say half and half, but rather we say that all of the edible part is teruma. And so that's exactly the same as in this case. So just like in the case of the cucumber, when he donates it, he says, okay, the part that is not edible, that is not going to count. So you forget about that. But all of the edible part will count. And so he says this whole cucumber is teruma. The teruma applies entirely to the edible part. And since that's not yet 2%, so he has to add another one. And so we can see that in the case of at v'chamor is the same thing, that if he says you and the donkey get $100, the donkey can't get anything, so the person gets all 100. That's Rav Sheshat's proof. But the Gemara says, no, that's not a good proof. That case is different because on a deoraita level, that inside of the fruit, even though it doesn't taste good, even though it's bitter, still on a deoraita level, it is considered teruma. It's only the rabbis come and say it's not proper to give something that's spoiled or that tastes bad as teruma. But on deoraita level, it can be teruma. This is not like a donkey. A donkey cannot acquire anything on any level, not the Oraita, not the Rabbanan. It's not anywhere in the category of a being that can acquire, that can own property. And so therefore, it's not necessarily a proof. It could very well be in the case of teruma, that when you say the whole cucumber is going to be teruma, it applies to all the good part, because technically even the bad part on the Oraita level could be teruma, just on the Rabbanan level one should not do that. So therefore, the statement is valid, but it will apply to the good part, and that's why you should add another piece of a cucumber to make the full 2%. Whereas in the case of the person and the donkey, since the donkey is out of the category totally of acquiring anything, so in that case it could be that we throw out the whole statement, and so this is not necessarily a proof for Rav Sheshat. And now we're just going to prove that on the Doraita level, even bad tasting food does become teruma. Damar bi el'a minayin l'trumin ra ala yafe shetrumata teruma shenemar ve'lo tis'u alav chet v'harimechem et chelbo mimenu v'imeno kadosh nesiut chet lama mikan l'trumin ra ala yafe shetrumat teruma. Rabbi El'a says, how do you know that if someone separates some fruit that's bad in order to relieve the obligation on food that's good? As you have 10, 50 good apples and you have a bad apple on the side there, how do you know that if I use that bad apple in order to permit me to eat the rest, I make that teruma, so that I be permitted to eat the rest of them? How do you know that it's valid? Because the pasuk says, and do not bear a sin, seeing that you have set apart the best thereof. In other words, if you separate the best part of the produce as teruma, then you will not have a sin. But if you separate the bad part of the produce, then it will be a sin. Now, why would it be a sin? If it doesn't become holy at all, if it doesn't become teruma, then what sin did I do? If I just picked up the bad apple, I says this is teruma. If you'd say it's not teruma, then I didn't do anything. It's just a meaningless act. It would be like if I pick up a piece of wood and I say this is teruma for those apples. It's not good. I mean, it's not good. It's not bad. It's not a sin. It's nothing. It's completely meaningless. So therefore, you see from the fact that the Torah says it is a sin, that means it's a sin because it is in fact teruma. So therefore, you should not do it. But if you did it, it is in fact teruma. So on the Doraita level, that's how we see that even something bad tasting is teruma. So that's why it could be in the case of the cucumber, when you say the whole cucumber should be teruma, that statement works because the inside technically could be teruma. So that's, in that case, yes, it will apply to the statement will make sense, and we will apply the good part. But and when you talk about a donkey, which cannot on any level acquire anything, then maybe we throw out the whole thing, so there's no proof for Rav Sheshat. Amar le Rav Mordechai le Rav Hashem, metiv Rav Avia tiyubta. מעשה בחמש נשים ובהן שתי אחיות וליקט אחד כלכלה של תאנים ושלהן הייתה ושל שביעית הייתה ואמר הרי כולכן מקודשות לי בכלכלה זאת וקיבלה אחת מהן על ידי כולן. אמרו חכמים, אין אחיות מקודשות. We're now going to challenge Rav Hamnuna who said just above that if someone says, I'm going to give this to you and the donkey, he said nothing at all. And no, but the person gets 0. We just throw out the whole statement. But look at this. It's a Mishnah in Masechet Kiddushin. If someone, let's say there's 5 women, 2 of them are sisters, the other 3 are not related to each other. And then a man comes along and takes a basket of figs that belong to them, but they were also Shevi'it. So in other words, it's on a field that they own. The figs are from a field that they own, but since it's Shevi'it, so everybody is allowed to come and take whatever figs they want to. So therefore, this guy who came along, once he picks up that basket, so he acquires those figs, so they are his. And then he says, you are all betrothed unto me with this basket of figs. And he gives it to one of them, and one of the women accepts it on behalf of all of them. So he wants to marry these 5 people. Now, the rabbi said that 3 of them, the ones that are not related to each other, the Kiddushin works for them, but for the 2 of them that are sisters, it does not work. Why? Achayot hu de'en mekudashot, hanochriot mekudashot, amai, at v'chamor hi. Now, why are the sisters not mekudashot? Because one is not allowed, one's not permitted to be married to 2 sisters at the same time. Not even while they're both alive. If someone marries one, you cannot marry the other, and therefore the Kiddushin cannot apply to both of the sisters, and therefore it applies to none of them. It's just a meaningless statement. It'd be like going to someone who you're not permitted to marry, like a close relative, and say haret mikudeshet. It does nothing at all. They're not married. They don't need a get. It's nothing. It's like saying absolutely nothing, and therefore we ignore that statement and make believe, and it's like he said nothing at all. Yet the other 3 are mikudashot. So you see, the question is why? Isn't this the same as at v'chamor? Just like over here, we say that he had a compound statement. He said, well, it's one statement, but it includes a lot of people. He said, you are all betrothed unto me. But that statement can apply to 3 people, but cannot apply to 2 people. And the rabbis say, we ignore the negative part, the part that won't work, and we accept the positive part that can work. Then that we should apply the same thing to at v'chamor, where also you're saying a statement and saying $100 is going to you and the donkey. It can't go to the donkey, so we take off that part, and we should still apply the part that goes to the person. And so just like 3 of them are betrothed, so too the person should be able to get at least some of the money. And so that's a challenge against Rav Hamnuna. Amar lehainu dechazai Rav Huna bar Avya bechelma temotiv Rav Avya tiyubta lav mi okimna damad hareuya mikem lebiat itkadesh li. Rav Asher told Rav Mordechai, oh, that's why I saw Rav Huna, the son of Rav Avya, in a dream, because he's the one that asked this question. You see, this whole conversation was something that Rav Mordechai presented to Rav Asher, and he presented to him this question that Rav Avya asked. And so Rav Asher is now responding to Rav Mordechai, and he says, now I understand why I saw in a dream Rav Huna, the son of Bar Avya, the son of Rav Avya here, in a dream, because he's the one that's going to ask me a question. So this is good. I had a heads up to think about this question, and in fact I have an answer. Didn't we already discuss that Mishnah? And we explained that it's specifically talking about a case where the man says, whoever is eligible among you for relations will be betrothed unto me. In other words, he added a clause. He says, the 5 are here. I want to betroth all of you with this, but only those who I'm allowed to be with. So that would apply to the 3 unrelated women, but it would not apply to the 2 sisters, because he is not permitted to be with both sisters. And so, because he added these words, that's why we ignore the part of the statement that applies to the sisters, and we do apply the rest of it. But if he didn't say this added statement, then in fact you're right. According to Rav Hamnuna, we would throw out the whole thing. So Rav Hamnuna can answer the question perfectly and say, if you you just say a statement and include everything, and part of the statement does not apply, then we throw out the whole thing. But if you add a clause and say, I'm saying the statement only to those to whom it can apply, then it will apply to all of them, to all those for whom it can apply. So if someone says to his wife, I want my property to be given to you and your sons. Okay, good. So some of it will go to the wife and some to the sons. The question is, what's the ratio? Now, Yosef says the wife gets half, and all the sons, even if there's 10 sons, they will split the other 50%. ואמר רב יוסף, מנה מנהלה, דתניא רבי אומר, והייתה לאהרון ולבניו, מכסה לאהרון, מכסה לבניו. Rav Yosef says, I have a source from a Braita where Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says that the showbread will be given to Aaron and his sons. And the Braita, Rabbi Yehuda explains, why does it say it like this? Means that Aaron, or whoever is the Kohen Gadol, gets half, and all the rest of the Kohanim get half. Right? When we're going to split up the showbread, then that's how you split it up. And so, just like over here, it's the same formulation. If you say a person's name and the sons, the person gets half and the sons get half. Same thing here. It says his wife, you and the sons. That means you, the wife gets half, and the sons get together the other half. אמר לאביי בשלמה התם, אהרון בר חלוקה הוא, לאחי פריד ברך המנה למשקל פלגה, אישה לה בת ירושה היא, דיה שתיטול כאחד מן הבנים. Abaye said, I disagree. These two cases are not comparable. In the case of Aharon, I understand that derasha, because Aharon is eligible to receive a regular share. So therefore, if he said nothing, if the Torah said nothing at all, we would assume that Aharon is himself a Kohen, and so Aharon, together with the Kohanim, will each get an equal share. I would have assumed that Aharon is going to get an equal share no matter what. Now that you come and specify Aharon and his sons get, it must be that he is to teach that he gets more than just an equal share with everybody else. So it must be that he gets half, because he's mentioned Aharon, you and Banav, so therefore you each get half. So only because I already assumed he would get an equal portion, that's why this pasuk comes to say, no, not an equal portion, even more. However, regarding the wife, if the husband said nothing, the wife would get 0. The wife does not inherit a husband, and the sons would share everything. And so therefore, now that the husband said, oh, I want you to take my property with my sons, so then that she should only go one step up so that she can get an equal share. If she has 9 sons, then they'll all get 1/10, and she also will get only 1/10. Right? That's sufficient to explain his words. We don't have to assume that he meant half and half, because she would get nothing at all. In the case of Aharon, he would get an equal share anyway. So then you don't have to say anything. He's a Kohen. If you said a statement, it means you want him to give half. But if the woman, since she wasn't going to get anything at all, so it's enough just to give her an equal share with everybody else. That is Abaye's opinion. But we're going to challenge it. Ini v'ha obada hava ben harda hava gebe Shemuel palga. B'tiberia v'gebe Rabbi Yochanan palga. So how could that be? In the Harda, we had a case like this, and Shemuel said half-half. And in Tiberias, where Rabbi Yochanan lived, a case came to him, and he also said half-half. So it goes against these precedents. And a further question. Ki ata Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef amar, hahu deme kelila tishtu debe malka abule ve'isteruge. Amar Rabbi netbu abule palga ve'isteruge palga. When Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef came from Eretz Yisrael, there was a certain tax that the king announced. It was a coronation tax. And he said that the city councilmen and the prominent citizens have to pay this tax. Bule means the council, so that's a councilman, and these rich people. Okay, they have to pay. And Rabbi says, well, how much should they pay? Well, they have to pay half-half. The councilmen pay half, and the wealthy citizens pay half. So you see that in all these cases, we assume that when someone mentions two groups or one person and a group, then it means this is half and that's half. So Abaye, why are you saying that the wife would only get one portion along with all of the sons? It should be half-half, like in these cases. And we answer for Abaye, Hachi Hashta, Hata Mekaraki Havu Katbe Abule Havu Katbe, Veistiruge Havu Mesayai Behadaihu. No, this last case here is not the same as the wife case, because there, before the king made any decree, at that time, they would write that the councilmen have to pay. And even though they wrote the councilmen have to pay, the rich citizens would also help out. That's what was going on beforehand, for years beforehand. And the king knew that they were doing that. So if he said nothing, then it would be the status quo in which the councilmen and the citizens, they are all contributing something. But if the king is now giving a new decree, that means he wants to add something. He doesn't want the wealthy people just to give one portion. He wants them to give half. So that's why in this case it means half-half. But if the rich people had not been giving anything at all, and he made this decree, then it would mean only that they have to give one portion, not necessarily half. So you see that this case of the councilman is similar to the case of Aharon, where we're starting with that they're already contributing something. Then if you say a statement, then it makes it half-half. But if your starting point is that she's going to get nothing, and then the husband says something, then you only bring it up one notch, so that they all share equally, but it does not necessarily mean that it will be half-half. Next, Rabbi Zera gives a challenge against Rav Yosef, who said above that we split it half-half. So, Mativ Rabbi Zera, Haomed Hare Alai Mincha Mea Isaron Habi Bishne Kelim. Maybe Shishim Bekli Echad Varba'im Bekli Echad. Someone says, I make a vow that I'm going to bring a meal offering it's going to be the amount of 100 tenths of an ephah. And I'm going to bring it in 2 vessels. The halakha is that you cannot bring in one vessel, the maximum is 60 tenths of an ephah, because it has to fit and be able to mix it, and it won't fit and be able to mix well if it's more than 60 in a vessel. So the largest amount is 60. So he says 100, and he's going to bring it in 2 parts. So the halacha is, according to this Tosefta, that the ideal is to bring 60 and 40, 60 in one and 40 in the other. This is a challenge to Rav Yosef, because Rav Yosef says when you say 2 elements, then you mean half-half, and this one gets half, that one gets half. Yet here it doesn't say 50-50, it says 60-40. Now the Braita does say that Bidi Avad, if the person brought 50 and 50, then he fulfilled his obligation. But that's only Bidi Avad if he did it. But the Chatechila, he should bring 60-40. But if you agree with Rav Yosef and you say that in all cases where you say this and that, it means half and half, then even lechatechila, one should bring 50-50. And so we answer the question, no, it's different. In that case, we can tell that this person, from the start, he wants to bring a really large, very impressive offering. That's what he meant. And the fact that he said in 2 vessels is because he knows that you're not allowed to bring more than 60 in one vessel. So he wants to bring as much as he can in one vessel. It'll look really impressive. And then the leftover, whatever else he has to bring, will be in the other vessel. We know that that's what he had in mind, for it to be maximum and leftover, which is 60-40. That's why we price it differently. But it's not the same as when he's just giving $100 and he says to this and this, then you mean 50-50. The halacha follows Rav Yosef in 3 instances. Ours is the last one. The other 2 are sadehs, referring to when if one of the brothers says, if they're dividing in estates, says, I want this portion because it's closer to my other fields. That's the sadeh. Inyan is if you do a kinyan kinyan chalipin, we saw this recently, that you can still change your mind as long as you're still discussing the same topic. Then you can say, oh, I changed my mind. But once you move on to a different topic, even if you're sitting there, then you cannot change your mind. And this case of half-half, the halacha follows Rav Yosef that we split it into two, and the person will get half of the property. And next we have a story. Someone sent silk garments to his home. Maybe he's away, he went to China and he bought some silk and he sent it in a package back home. He didn't write who specifically should get each of these silk scarves. He just sent the whole box to the house. So how would I split it up? Amar bi ameh, haruin lebanim lebanim, haruin lebanot lebanot. So we look at the style, at the color. If they're fitting for boys, and you give it to the boys. If fitting for girls, you give it to the girls. The blue ones go to the boys. The pink ones go to the girls, or something like that. But that's only if there are no daughters-in-law. If there are daughters-in-law, then we assume that the guy meant that he wants to give gifts also to his daughters-in-law. However, if his daughters are not married, then certainly a person would not forsake his daughters and only give it to his daughters-in-law, and so therefore the silk is given to his daughters. So, in other words, we get this box, anything that's fit for boys, we give to the guy's sons. If those are fit for girls, if he has daughters who are unmarried, then it goes to the daughters. If they're married, then we assume their husbands are taking care of them, and so we give it to the daughters-in-law only. Someone says, I want all my property to go to my sons. Lebanai, he says in plural. Thing is, he only has one son, but he also has a daughter. So how do we understand this? Sometimes sons could mean many children, right? It could mean children. If you have a son and a daughter, what are you going to say? You say, my children. In Hebrew, it's still banai. So what does he mean? Banai. On the one hand, maybe people call even one son my sons. Maybe do people sometimes call a singular a plural because that's all of his sons? In that case, if that's what he meant, then what he wants to say is, I want to give all my property only to my son, and I don't want to give my daughter anything. Now, normally a daughter is not going to inherit anyway, but normally a daughter does get a portion of the estate as her dowry, so that she can get married in the future, and that would be 1/10 of the property. And so, is he saying, give everything to my sons? He means the son and nothing to the daughter. Or maybe people do not use a plural for a singular if they only have one son, and therefore when they say banai, they mean children, and that's because he wants to include his daughter in the gift, and he wants her to get an equal amount with the son. So for two very different outcomes. Abayah says, I have a clear proof from a pasuk. Pasuk says the sons of Dan is Chushim. Chushim is the name of one person. So you see that we do use a plural word, beneh, even when it's referring only to one person. Rava says, that pasuk is not a proof because we can interpret it as in accordance with the Braita of the school of Chizkiah. Where it says that Chushim is not the name of a person, but rather Bnei Dan had so many children, they were like Chushim, they were like reeds, there were so many of them. So in that case, he did have many sons, that's why it says Bnei. But there's no proof from here. Ela Marava, Ubnei Falu Eliab, Rav Yosef Hamad Bnei Etan Azariah. Rav says, I have a different proof. The sons of Falu is Eliav. So you see, only one son is called sons. And Rav Yosef also says, from another pasuk in Divrei Yamim, Bnei Etan, the sons of Etan are and only lists one person, Azariah. And so we see from here, when he said Banai, he was referring to his one son, and the son gets everything, and the daughter gets nothing. Similar question. Someone says, I want my property to go to my sons. He has one son, and he has one grandson. So now the question is, so we already established established that sometimes a person can call one son a plural, and maybe that's what he means, everything should go to the son and nothing to the grandson. Or maybe people call a grandson also son. So is that possible? Sometimes like a great-grandfather, you still might just say grandfather. So would you say son for grandson? Rav Chaviva Amar Karu Inashe Lebar Bera Bera. Rav Chaviva says, yes, people call their grandson their son, and therefore when he says my sons, half will go to the son and half will go to the grandson. Mor Bar Rav Ashe Amar La Karu Inashe Lebar Bera Bera. However, Mor, the son of Rav Ashe, says, no, people do not call their grandson a son, and therefore everything goes to the son, nothing goes to the grandson. Tanya Kevate Demor Bar Rav Ashe Hamutar Banim Mutar Bibnei Banim. And there's a braita that supports the opinion of Mor Bar Rav Ashe that people do not call a grandson a son, because the braita says if someone makes a vow and says, I am not going to derive any benefit from my sons, he is allowed to derive benefit from his grandson. So we see from here that grandsons is separate. Some people do not refer to grandsons as sons, and therefore that would be the halacha also here, since people do not call a grandson a son. Therefore, when he says, all my property goes to my sons, he means his one son, and nothing will go to the grandson. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.